Okay, so we can kick off. Again, thank you for joining the session. With me from the Common Voice team, we have Rebecca, we have Jessica. So maybe you can give them a minute to introduce themselves, and then we can kick off. Rebecca.
Hi everyone, my name is Rebecca and I was also part of this Common Voice project. I was mostly working around gender and diversity and I'll be sharing more about that today. Thank you everyone for joining us. I think I'll invite Jessica now.
If Jessica, you're speaking, you might be muted. Awesome. So the mini conference is an opportunity for us to talk about the work that we've been doing. So we'll go through this with Rebecca, and we'll be joined by EM in a few to be able to go through what we are here to share with you. We welcome questions in the Zoom, in the chat as you go on. Then we'll be able to deal with them or discuss them as we move on. And thank you for taking the time to introduce yourselves. I can see a whole lot of people we worked with during this work, and appreciate your time being here. So through the whole hopefully the next 2 hours, we're going to go through what the Common Voice Project is, introduction to the Kiswahili work, our community led efforts towards data creation, and a focus on gender. We're going to talk about the work we did with linguists across the 3 countries. So work covered Kenya, Tanzania, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. And then we're going to talk about the impact of the work we did, application areas and success stories, and the next steps of this work. A little bit of background. So voice technology is growing. The artificial intelligence space is growing, and voice technology focuses on enabling machines to process and respond to human speeches. It powers a number of services that some of us might have already interacted with: voice assistance, transcription services, language tools, things like text to speech, speech to text, kind of technologies. And voice technology has been important because we are looking at how inclusive it might be with regards to maybe the limited kind of technology that we have access to. And a number of existing applications we've seen fail to accommodate a number of local languages, their accents. This limits accessibility across, for example, our continent. What's missing is this diverse data sets that's able to train these models to be able to understand how we speak across different communities. We've seen that in the Western world, voice technologies are embedded in most of the Internet of Things, driving directions to home, other services such as medical services, devices. But in Africa, we are yet to see a lot of benefit from this technology, as most applications do not cater for different accents and local languages that you speak. So it's the work as Common Voice, I believe, is very important. Common Voice started in 2017. So Common Voice is a consent-centered data creation platform that seeks to make it possible for anyone to be able to create data sets for their languages. How it works: you request the language, then you localize the interface, which I'm going to give you a show. I'm going to show you. Then you're able to add sentences to the platform. These are sentences that are in the public domain. this goes towards building a text corpus. Then you're able to validate those sentences that have been added, and then record audio clips of people reading, of yourself or your community reading those sentences, validate the audio clips against the sentences. So the approach is democratize data access, data creation. So it is open to all. There's no need to be able to be a coder. You don't need to build or set up your own platform. So this is an open platform, community first, consent centered. So the community aren't just doers, they're shapers and creators. So this builds power and expertise, not just data sets. Radical inclusion. We focus on programmatic wrap around the solves real social problems within the world. So that we now have 200 plus languages and it's growing rapidly every day. So this is how the platform looks. So for this case, this is for the Kiswahili language. This is the interface that you get if you want to contribute a voice. You have a sentence in the middle, then you have a record button that you tap, then you're able to record yourself reading that sentence, write that sentence. And then the other way to contribute is to validate already recorded voices. So you get a sentence, then you have a play button where you can listen to the already recorded voice clip, then you give it a thumbs up and thumbs down. We have guidelines on how to validate, but the core is, are you able to listen to each and every word in that sentence? And then the other way to contribute is contributing through sharing of sentences or just writing sentences to the platform. And the sentences have to be in the public domain. That's the main requirement. So no copyright infringement. We have a 15 word limit, correct grammar, no inappropriate words, no use of letters in a sentence. So the number of projects that are supported under Common Voice. So we had, this was done through a fellowships program, and also again with grants that were given to a number of awardees who I'm seeing some are able to attend the session. So we have met Rebecca from Tanzania and DRC, then myself from Kenya, then we had Kathleen from Kenya, who was focused more on the machine learning aspects of the work. So we had a number of projects that got funding to be able to try out a number of things that we're going to see what they're able to build in the few slides. So we have from DRC, we had a Haki Defem by Collab, Core23 Lab. I've seen Jean in the call. We had Think from Kenya and Paza Sauti. We had Juicy Crafts. We had Imarika from Strathmore University. We had Tanzania, where we had Live Health, the Badili Innovations. We had Kazibora by C Africa from Tanzania. Then we had Wezesha and Kabambe from Westminster University in the UK. Then we had the Kiswahili text and voice recognition platform by the DuniaCom group. So when you're starting off the projects, these are the expected outcomes. Look at engaging 1,000 plus active community members who are going to contribute towards that data sets, collect 1,000 to 2,000 hours of voice data sets of voice, then train ASR models for 1 to 4 Kiswahili languages, develop products that will showcase the use of the data set that we are building. So I'll pass it on to Rebecca.
Thank you, Brighton. Brighton will help me to move along the slide as we go for the next one. So why did we take the approaches that we took? So one of the things that we had tried to understand is how the voice text space works and to understand AI training. And there are certain challenges that we identified along the process to the project. One of them was the challenges in the current voice data. So most models are kind of built from gendered kind of approach where it's more male nominated, more cisgender, which makes it quite difficult for other genders to interact with the technology. And this is how most of the AI models are trained. So these challenges kind of limit certain groups from participating or using projects or applications that are built out of voice as an enabler. And there's also the importance of the diverse data. So we kind of understood that there's also an importance in how we collect the contributor metrics like sex, gender, age, and to ensure that there's diversity in the data sets. This is because we learned from existing speech recognition models that there was a lack in level of response being equal among different genders, among people with different demographics. So that was the importance of why we thought of having diverse data set. But also there was a need of expanding voice data sets. So for them to kind of improve the AI accuracy, reduce the biases in terms of race, gender, accents, things like that, to ensure inclusivity and to allow different demographics to interact with ASR models or any solution that is built off of voice. Then we also had an issue around gender and age in voice data. So we realized that there's a difference between how different ages interact with voice solutions because there's a lot of data that is built or that is collected that does not represent the different age groups. So that was one thing that we wanted to address because we saw a link between the difference between how G and Zs and millennials interacted with this kind of solutions compared to older generations, especially women over 50, who were often overlooked when it comes to tech engagement, including voice. And then also we saw that there was a need to make room for women at the table. So including them, not only in the process of building the data set for AI training, but also trying to look for solutions at which we can be able to reduce biases and ensure accessibility. To the next slide. So what we did in this process is we had a set of plans that we were going to use to kind of build up that process. One of them was community engagement strategies, which Brighton led. So one of the things, the key start was starting from the basics. So we had to identify that to build this, we need to think about how we start from the very basics to address these challenges. So I'm not going to go through much through this slide. I'll give it to Brighton to lead us through these community engagement strategies, and then I'll come in through the gender aspect. Brighton, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. With the number of strategies we took, so we cited a lot of digital literacy. So a lot of questions around what is voice technology, what is AI, and those need to be able to communicate, discuss these kind of technologies with the communities. Then those around trust, around being able to use your voice, maybe for example to access mobile money transactions. There was a time when Safaricom was trying to introduce voice as a way of identifying yourself. So we had this challenge. So we were able to encourage voice data sets. Contribution was key. The number of fears and misconceptions around the voice technology. When something is new, there's always fear that may arise within communities. There were a lot of work that we had to do. For example, there are communities that requested maybe a community doesn't know English, so for them to also contribute to Swahili, they requested us to be able to, for example, teach them English. So there are communities that will request that kind of form of incentive for them to learn English. In return, they're able to contribute to Swahili assets. There was a lot of family planning and health education. We worked with a whole lot of communities. For example, there's a community that's for example, in Changamwe, in Mombasa, that works around family planning and health. And they said one of the things the communities need was around sanitary pads. So for us to be able to work with such communities, there are these kinds of requests. These are some of the strategies we use to reach them. Those digital awareness fraud, as I mentioned, around voice, accessibility, the moderators assist non-readers. So there are cases where there are challenges around reading. We had also challenges around simple and inclusive participation among potential contributors to the dataset. Then we had to work around ethical, social, and cultural context within that context. We had to recognize diverse cultural backgrounds. So, for example, some of the voice clips might, to someone in Kenya, a recording for example, from the DRC might not sound similar to what she or he is used to. So those are the kind of cultural backgrounds we had to work with. We had to engage stakeholders, for example, like husbands in villages where, for example, to be able to access or work with women, you had to work with men first to be able to understand the whole project, then get them to participate. Then you had to provide transport and logistics support. A lot of communities, we had to bring communities together in one central location to be able to get them to support our work. Through for them to be able to contribute, we had to provide that kind of support.
You, Doctor.
Sorry, please mute. So then we had women-centered community engagement. We partnered with women organizations to be able to build trust and reach more communities. We had women-only events. So we had some of our community champions that I'm going to mention in a few. We were able to organize sessions during International Women's Day. They were to collaborate together, they were to run women-only initiatives. We had, so this is an example of 60 plus women engaged during the Women's Day in 2022. And then I've talked about community champions. This is a strategy we took because we believed the leaders who already exist in the different communities are able to communicate better, are able to build trust, they're able to communicate what the kind of the mission of the work that we're doing. So we created a group of what we call community champions within the different countries to be able to help us with this work. So they led community contributions and validations, and also they led sentence validation sessions. We had a number of amazing partners who are summary in the call. We had a Kaya Arts Initiative who supported us with running writing competitions to be able to build the text corpus. And thankfully, from them, from their work, we're able to build a very diverse text corpus. Then you had Swahili Hub support us run the Swahili Common Voice Festival. And then we were able to run hackathons with them. We worked with the Pwani University in Kilifi, the Swahili department, to be able to run a number of programs with the students. So through the Pwani University, we were able to work with an artist whose work is majorly in Kiswahili, to be able to run writing workshops with students. Then with the same students, we were able to run writing competition after each session that then went to contribute towards the text corpus. We worked with Africa Stocking to run hackathons in Kenya and another one in Tanzania. And we also worked with them to be able to showcase some of our work. Our other strategy was go through conferences. We went to Safaricom Engagement Summit, the MassiCorps AgriFin Conference, the conference on state of artificial intelligence in Africa, the Africa AI Summit. We participated in Swahili Literary Festival that brings people who are interested in the Swahili language and culture, and we're able to talk about the work. They're able to contribute to the datasets. Common Voice festivals we had them in Kenya and the DRC. We also worked with a number of community-based organizations. Polytechnic Girls is an organization that's focused on women and girls in technology. Kyoto community in Changamwe that works with women. We had Kisauni Youth Group that works with youth, young men and women in the coast region. We had the Britini response team, worked the Pomoja, the Pwani Pomoja initiative. Take it back to Rebecca.
Thank you, Brighton. So the thing I just want to emphasize that at any point, if you have a question or comment on anything that is being presented, please feel free to put it on the chat and then we'll be able to come up. I'm receiving some questions already. We're taking note of them and we'll be able to respond. So the gender action plan. So the main aim of this was to make room for women at the table when it comes to discussions around voice technology. And we came to this conclusion because we realized that there are more men than women in technology-related roles. And this is not new, especially in Africa, and is due to, the traditional norms and gender biases that kind of tend to exclude women already from engineering jobs. So this is how we actualize the gender action plan. So the gender action plan briefly is just a plan that kind of guided us towards how we thought about gender in the whole process of doing this project. So from designing the project to defining what use cases were going to be supported, to coming down to how the data was collected, how these models were built and evaluated, and how we checked impact as well as the engagement of different stakeholders throughout the process. So this graph that you see here is kind of a representation of some of the things that we were able to see about the gender action plan's implementation. So 75% of the project teams that received funding, or the awardees, so some of them are here, were actually led by the tech leads were men. So that's one of the findings that we had. And then only 25% of them had the technology development leads be women. So that already shows you the disparity. Despite the intentionality to have gender inclusion, it was still a challenge because of just how things are structured and how things are taking place in terms of practice in the communities themselves. Then when it comes to voice contribution here, because of a lot of the work that champions did, whom a lot of them are in this call right now, we had a very high number of female contributions, as you can see, 66.7%. And that was deliberate because we wanted to have a representation of more within the data set itself. And part of that was those strategies that Brighton mentioned were very key in pushing for this. And then the target groups, so we had an emphasis on even the use cases that we supported, people who build solution, to have a key focus on how whatever solution they build will affect or impact women. And in this regard, 81.25% were target groups were women in the projects that were supported and even in the work that we did or the programming. And the total gender representation, despite this intentionality, was still skewed towards men. So we had a higher percentage, about 66% of the gender representation being male and only 33.84% overall being female. So this goes to show that despite the intentionality, there's still barriers and challenges that needs to be addressed for us to push up that gender representation when it comes to how voice technology response to different genders. To the next slide, Brighton. So out of this gender action plan, we were able to kind of identify things that we learned along the way on how we can be able to mitigate this imbalances between the genders. Brighton, to the next slide. Yeah. So what we were able to develop out of this was the gender bias mitigation guide, which is kind of the learnings that we got out of the work that we did, and of course from how we were implementing the gender action plan. The previous one. The previous slide. Yeah, thank you. So the first step in this process was actually creating a gender action plan, which I mentioned in the beginning. I think we have a bit of a misalignment on the slides. The next one. Yeah, just that one. Yes. So we created a gender action plan, which kind of went through the whole phases from data collection, model development, and the use cases, and as well as the impact itself in terms of evaluation and learning. And then there was also an aspect around identifying and framing problems. So these steps that I'm mentioning, we use them, but we are also learning. Some of them were learnings that we had along the work that we're recommending as ways that people can utilize to kind of address or mitigate the gender biases. So there's also an aspect about identifying and framing the problem. So asking who is impacted, how are they impacted, what are the best ways to build inclusive solutions? How can we prevent marginalization of already groups that are kind of left out in the process? So that is very critical in kind of establishing a benchmark on how to move forward. And then there was also data quality control. So to check the data set in gender balance, remember the previous graph that I shared that showed how much data we collected from people who identify as female and from those who identify as male, and then trying to address those gaps before the model training. So we're trying to build first an inclusive data set. And then also we had the test character error rate or word error rate for bias detection for the models themselves. That was mostly towards kind of being able to address any biases that might exist. Then there's issues of fundamental rights and legal compliance, which is also quite crucial, just because different countries have different laws already. And you can see we work through Tanzania, DRC, and Kenya. And these laws, they really range from data protection laws in the specific countries to strategies that countries have around AI. For example, I think this year Kenya has the draft AI strategy. All these countries have different regulations that they're coming up with, but we are trying to see how legal compliance can be held. So for the case of the Common Voice platform, there is already a privacy statement that explains how your data will be used. This is more as to guide user consent in terms of how they contribute their data. And then we had also user-centered design, which is more about involving the target groups. How do you engage them in the process of defining what solutions will work for them? So in this process, we did a whole research where we engaged with different stakeholders from CSOs, sorry, I got disconnected connection. I hope everyone can still hear me.
Yes.
So there was the use case research that we did, and that helped us to define what use cases would then go ahead in terms of funding the awardees that we had talked about in the beginning. So this was mostly in two domains. We had the domain of finance and
I think it seems to have lost Rebecca. And so maybe what I can do is I can go to the next slide, and when she comes, she can finish up. So I'm going to talk about our work with linguists. One of the linguists, I believe, is here. We have Abu working with us, who had worked with us when starting the work. We looked at the history of Kiswahili, the influence, the geographical spread. We looked at that because our work involved working in Tanzania, Kenya, and Democratic Republic of Congo. So we had to kind of get us some background, understand how the language spread, the different dialects, the different ways in which language is spoken. And there was a lot of discussion around Arabs' influence on the language, um, French influence on the language. This is all colonial influence through the trade work that was being done across the countries, use of language to separate the foreign countries from local communities in the different countries. So we looked at every aspect around this before or while we're starting this work. So we were able to look at a number of dialects. Several dialects emerged from the work. Looked at a number of Kimbuja. We were able to build data sets, text corpus around those different dialects. We engaged, as I mentioned, we engaged linguists across the three countries, focused on language diversity. And also they helped us, again, with building the voice data sets around those different, especially dialects that we felt were disappearing. We're able to build that data set. We had a number of findings from the linguist. So we looked at the standard Kiswahili was one variant among many, resulting from colonial influence through the different regions. So DRC, Kiswahili has a French influence. You see, Kenya and Tanzania has an English influence. We have the coastal Kiswahili that has influence from the Arabic and the Oman that were in the region, where Kiswahili seems to have grown. From this, we identified around 23 variants, focusing on 10 widely spoken dialects, helping us create 2,172 sentences for the Common Voice research and data collection. The Kiswahili dialects grouped into 5 major regional categories: the East African, Indian Ocean Coast, the Inland Kiswahili of Kenya, the Inland Kiswahili of Tanzania. Then you had the Northern DRC Kiswahili, the Southern DRC Kiswahili. So this work was integrated into the Common Voice platform. We added the ability to be able to select a dialect feature for self-identification. We had contributors can now record and validate sentences within their specific dialects. Then we had standard Kiswahili speakers struggled with less common dialects, then led to an academic paper that we're able to communicate this finding that we can share after this session. Language preservation was also critical in the discussions we had with linguists. So the Kiswahili dataset creation is driven by local speakers, ensuring cultural and linguistic representation. We had to make sure that we reached different communities, communities that felt that their language was disappearing. Even in the writing competition, we had submissions in those specific dialects. And then we expanded the dialect diversity. The Kiswahili dataset includes multiple dialects and regional variations to preserve linguistic heritage. The tech's role in documenting linguist diversity, the Common Voice Kiswahili program, the dataset is open. We expanded access to AI voice technology for the African continent. And then looked at equitable AI development, so gender inclusive datasets, improves accuracy in voice recognition for diverse datasets and demographic. Rebecca has talked about this. Tech for economic empowerment, AI-powered voice applications helps those in the agriculture, land rights, and the business, small business grow through access to different to information in the Swahili language. And then language diversity and cultural heritage. Language representation is very important because it helps communities, community influence. So language marginalization impacts decision making, power, and socioeconomic opportunities. Women were key drivers, inspired by Chama's. These are women groups, the women groups model across the 3 countries. The projects now focus on female-led initiatives that we're going to discuss in the field. So Rebecca is back.
Yes, I am. Thank you, Brighton. I'm sorry for the connectivity. So I'll just move on with the downstream impact. So this is mostly talking about the work that the awardees did. Brighton, you can move to the next slide. So in the downstream impact, the awardees that we worked with, which were a total of 8, were mandated to kind of undertake exactly 2 programs simultaneously. So one of them was contributing to the expansion of the Common Voice datasets by voices or sentences and upload them on the Common Voice platform, as well as help with validation of the voices, and also to train models and develop products for 4 use cases. So the use cases specifically within agriculture and finance. And the grant recipients who participated in this program, who had different experiences, different spaces that they work in, were also supported to kind of think through how they can integrate things like gender, community, and also participate towards growing the database. Okay, next slide. So for the different projects that were supported, we have Haki the Femmes. Haki the Femmes was from DRC, from the organization called Code 23 Lab. And their project was mostly to leverage voice technology to provide access to legal information and support for women in Katanga and Lualaba provinces of DRC, with the purpose of ensuring that they have the right to access, utilize, inherit, control, and own land. So their community engagement strategy, or how they contributed to the platform, was first they conducted voice donations and validation in their target communities. So they had 5 training workshops on land rights and digital skills for 160 women across different villages and a town in DRC. And in terms of voice contributions, they contributed about 7,039 sentences to 55 men and 67 women. They also supported 5 people, most especially women, in developed and research-based curriculum laws, which was translated then from French to Swahili so that they can be able to build their and this curriculum that they translated was translated to Congolese Swahili. So the work that Brighton was mentioning about the linguistic diversity applied here, because the content they created was not in the standardized Swahili, but in the Congolese Swahili. They trained models on key 3 things: digital literacy, the community, the app itself, land rights, and what the women wanted to learn about land rights. And then the product development for use cases. So they developed a voice-enabled application that does text-to-speech, drama videos, and complex issues in land inquire about things that like access to land, legal documentation, marriage protocols, inheritance, and ownership of land. The next slide. So this was our D who was based in
So we seem to have lost Rebecca again. Sorry for that. Hi, Rebecca. Welcome back. Maybe you can try turning off the video. Maybe it might help.
Okay. Thank you. So the next was Imarika. Imarika is based out of Kenya, and the objectives was to provide a friendly user interface for smallholder farmers to interact with agro-advisories. So for them, they engage with local communities, mostly for training sessions around climate smart agriculture. And this, I think, it was based out of Strathmore University. And they piloted a solution in Butula and Nambale sub-counties in Busia, Western Kenya. We specifically worked with farmer groups, 4 of them, which allowed them to reach 92 people, that is 14 men and 78 women, smallholder farmers. As you can see, the effort is still deliberate towards women, just for the purpose of the diversity in terms of the lack of enough data sets towards women that are used for ASR models. And then their voice contribution, they also collected sentences related to weather inquiries with keywords that related to weather in Swahili. And they collected 4 hours worth of voice data from 358 people. 47.49% of them were female. Their model is also available on Hugging Face. Most of these models are actually available in the open to be used and utilized on Hugging Face and on GitHub. Then the product development use case, the Imarika WeatherWise, a comprehensive solution. It combined both an Android application with a mini weather station that delivered localized weather information. So the application is fully available in Kiswahili, just for ensuring accessibility and use it to the target audience, which are small-scale farmers. The next slide, Brighton. So the next is Think. Think is a business is also an organization based out of Kenya, and they had a business and access to capital credit securitization or a collateral registry application that they built. So the objective was also to build a voice-enabled chatbot in both Swahili and English that will raise awareness about use of collateral security to access credit and capital in Kenya. Part of their community engagement efforts was they worked with financial institutions, as because their work was mostly targeted towards capital and credit. They also worked with these two financial institutions was the Caritas Microfinance Bank and EcoBank. They also worked with rural communities such as women in agriculture, developer communities. They worked with 3 universities and had a boot camp and presented 2 masterclasses as part of their community engagement strategies. They didn't work on voice contributions, but their models is also worked on the open. So they based on the language datasets that were collected on the Common Voice platform, and they aim to tune the specific language models to be optimal for the domain of collateral, credit, and business. And they trained a bilingual text-based chatbot around movable properties and security registry and created a handbook on the same. So the product development for use cases for them was they developed and deployed the first public sector bilingual text-based chatbot in Kenya on the BRS website around the movable properties and security registry. This, which kind of helps also with business registration services, the BRS, that is the business registration services. The next slide, Brighton. So we also had Kiazibora. Kiazibora is based out of Tanzania and is from the organization See Africa. So they had a project whose objective was to increase the community's awareness of nutritional values of the orange flesh sweet potato. So this was more around access to the skills, market availability for both raw and processed OFP. OFP is the orange flesh potatoes through the voice dataset application. Part of the community engagement strategy was they trained 10 community support groups of 300 women around the orange flesh potato. And then they used the voice-enabled application to do that work. So they carried out around 12 community-based awareness trauma events. They conducted health facility-based education events. They also engaged with districts. That when talk about district, we mean government authorities that they worked with within the communities they were working in. They also worked national meetings, approximately 500 government and NGO representatives to kind of push the availability for people to know that Kiazibora exists and what they can do with it. They also conducted 12 mobile application awareness radio sessions around the uptake of the application itself and education around the orange sweet flesh potato. They also participated in exhibitions on the Saba on their product and conducted awareness through commemorating the African Child Day. Their project contributed 5,300 sentences to the text corpus on Common Voice platform, and they also contributed voices to the platform. The model training, they had an external expert who they hired to develop the structure of the application. And additionally, they also had product development for use cases, so mostly the voice-enabled mobile application around OSP farming. The next slide, we had Leaf Health. The next slide, Leaf Health.
Okay. So maybe I've lost Rebecca again. So maybe I can help through the session. So we had Live Health that focused on translating disease manuals to Swahili and generate voice-based disease manual applications to Kenyan and Tanzanian dialects. They held 2 workshops in Kenya, fully funded by their partner, One Health Research Education Outreach Center in Africa, and Tanzania using internal resources and savings. So we translated and validated 3 English disease manuals to 6 livestock manuals in Kiswahili, Tanzania, in the Kenya and Tanzanian dialects. We submitted over 3,000 Swahili phrases to the standard voice platform. They tested and fine-tuned 17 large language models in speech recognition, and ultimately selected 2 ASR models, which have been published in an open platform, that is Hugging Face. So you can go to huggingface.co/badili to be able to see this. They revamped and updated the Live Health mobile application. They designed it and developed the project website at livehealth-kc.badili.co.ke for the dissemination of these livestock manuals. Then we had Wezesha Kabambe. The projects focused on creating a Swahili voice chatbot that empowered smallholder farmers, women farmers in Bungoma, Vihiga, and Trans Nzoia counties that serves as an alternative to the agricultural extension officers. They trained women to use the mobile application and chatbots to access the required information. The projects specifically target counties with predominantly disadvantaged communities in Western Kenya, where access to work, markets, electricity, technology, and national media is limited. The women smallholder farmers are often marginalized in technology design processes were also included. They conducted 50 interviews throughout the process. Transparency was maintained within the team, ensuring that everyone had a voice in the chatbot design. The technical team adjusted the design to meet the specific needs identified by the research team, resulting in a hybrid design. So that is a chatbot that is suitable for feature phones and smartphones. They developed proof of concept, a prototype chatbot for digital solution aligning with the community extension services. Then we had DuniaCom, who developed a voice recognition platform accessible in Kiswahili languages that offers smallholder farmers in Tanzania. In the Tanzania maize value chain, personalized digital financial and non-financial automated services on location, agroecological zones, and crop cycles. The mobilized communities in the southern highlands of Tanzania represent as many different groups of Swahili speakers as possible. The open voice communities are also established in various colleges and universities across the Southern Highland regions. There were 300 unique voice contributors, of whom 54% were male and 46 were female. 15 Common Voice ambassadors were trained. The Mozilla Common Voice vision tools and materials were translated to Kiswahili language. Kiswahili sentences in the domain of agriculture and financial literacy were collected and verified. So Swahili, and then they recorded the voice clips and validated them. Then a financial education or literacy curriculum in Kiswahili was also developed through their work. They trained an effective and inclusive Swahili voice recognition model with 2 key considerations: the diversity of voice contributors and the quality of contributions. Again, they have this on Hugging Face. So you can go to Hugging Face and look for the NEACOM groups with a small Swahili model. So Swahili voice-based application with speech to text and text to speech functionality facilitate easy access to agricultural information, and financial literacy was also developed. Okay, so I think we can take this time to see if we have questions in the chat and be able to respond to them. And I hope Rebecca.
Yes, I'm back. Thank you, Brighton, for finishing that. So for questions, I think there were two questions on the chat. There was one from Grace Irungu that asked, do you take all languages? I think Jessica is here. I'll ask Jessica if you can respond to that question. Do you take all languages? I think the question is addressed towards Common Voice.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Stunning. So the short answer to that is yes. But with any kind of taxonomy, it's yes, but, or yes, and. So we're so excited to include any languages. Sometimes what folks think of as languages may be linguistically considered a major variant or a dialect of another language, but we've got the capacity to classify and collect those as well. So pretty much if it's a language that has living speakers, we're so excited. And I'll go ahead, if it's not hijacking, to drop a link to how folks can add languages if that's interesting. That's such a good question. Thank you so much for tapping me in.
Yes, Jess. Thank you. I think that would be useful to share that as well. And the next question is from Danielle, who's asking the question of benefits from donating their voices. Has the question of benefits from donating their voice that have been raised in any ways by the participating communities? A quick answer to that is yes. You mentioned incentives to participate, but what about benefits from downstream usage of the data by developers? I wonder if this is something on the mind of contributing communities and how it can be addressed, example, licensing. So on this question, I think I'll give some input, and then I think Brighton can also input. And I think towards the end, EM, when EM will be giving the future plans, I think there are things that she will also address. So, for example, in this question around benefits, communities have exactly asked these questions around how this will be beneficial. They give their data, what happens in the end. And one of the things that we did in the process of the Kiswahili work was first work through incentives, how we can incentivize the communities to engage. So these were some of the strategies that Brighton mentioned, but also one thing that we have been working around is how best to work with communities of developers around the usage of the data to benefit the communities as the receiving end. So this is what the hackathons that we did with Africa's Talking and Swahili Pot were about, where communities were given access to the data sets and asked to play around with them to create something that is useful in their communities, with the key consideration of the aspects that we mentioned around gender, community engagement, and downstream impact to the communities that they will benefit from this kind of work. So that is one way, but also the awardees work was one ways in which we were able to kind of bring back the benefit to the communities by the data set being used to create something that they in the end benefited. We did have, for example, interviews with beneficiaries of Kiazi Bora, who talked to us about how they participated both in contributing their voice dataset and how in the end they saw how this dataset translated into an application that has been useful for them to learn about orange switch flesh potatoes, which has in turn increased their yield in terms of benefit of how they are selling and adding value to the products that they're building. Brighton, if you have anything to add on that question as well.
And so maybe I can invite Nick to talk about benefits from the usage as developers. So I don't know if Nick, you can hear me. Maybe you can just take 1 minute to share your experiences.
Sure. I'm Nick from Think. I think some of the benefits around the voice was building tools for developers, since that's what you're doing at Think. So part of that are the models that we also built and put them on Hugging Face. On top of that, we give developers information and access as to how they can use our chatbots, how they can fine-tune our models, and these models has been trained using Common Voice data. So yeah, I mean, it has been a lot of help to us, and also to the whole developer community in Kenya that we're building this tech for. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So maybe I can pass it to M, talk about licensing, maybe.
Hi everyone. Sorry, I'm also trying to operate the Slido where we're getting some really great questions, so I'm sharing those in the chat as well. Yeah, so I'll go into this in more detail at the end of the amazing presentation by Rebecca and Brighton. But essentially, we've spent the last kind of 18 months really listening to communities who hold quite different views about this question. We wanted to hold space for everyone to express how they felt about it. On the one hand, we have lots of community members who feel very strongly about keeping the licensing extremely simple so that anyone can use it, and who are quite committed to the most kind of hardcore version of open source and open data principles. And have flagged that for lots of the people who are using the data set, they may not have in-house legal, and the more complex the requirements around using the data set, the harder it is for people to know if they're allowed to use it and what they're allowed to use it for. So that's at one end of the spectrum. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there are a lot of community members who feel that for them to dedicate time and energy and resources and to really put into projects like this, it has to be clear what is coming back to them and how it's benefiting their organizations and their communities and the amazing things they do. So again, we've been trying to hold space for that. We're excited to share, and we'll talk about it more at the end, that we've come to the conclusion that a CC0 only approach is not going to be sufficient for all of the different communities around Common Voice. And so our goal is to give you all more choice. So we are this year piloting with 2 confirmed language communities already, and we are looking for more people who would like to be part of this first kind of year learning pilot to basically put alternative community controlled licenses into place on the platform. So instead of just having CC0, people will be able to choose from some of the new licenses that are coming out that have other requirements, such as for data consumers to contribute back to the source project, for community members who are happy for the data to be open sourced, but they want it to be attributed, or they only want it to be free to access for organizations based in the country in which they're operating. The communities will just have a lot more choice. So we are not going to be opinionated about exactly which license they choose. We're trying to give communities a kind of menu of options to decide what's right for them. So I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail at the end, but also happy to take questions in the chat as Rebecca and Brighton go on. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you very much. So Rebecca, there's a question that came in through Slido. The question is, how did you work around women fears voice contributions?
Thanks. So I think on this aspect, we first had the approach that we used around having people who come from those communities be the ones to engage mostly and interact with women to push them towards, or to kind of show them the value of contributing their voices. One of the things was the platform itself, the ability to contribute anonymously. So that was a key factor towards making the women also feel safe to contribute. So for them to have that ability to know that they have the power to choose whether or not they're going to disclose any kind of information around who they are, and you know, including gender or age. So having that power kind of allowed others to feel comfortable to contribute to the platform, knowing that they are able to own the space the way they want to contribute their data. And that was very useful in terms of those who felt that they didn't want to share like their age or their name or their email, so they could contribute anonymously. But there was also the aspect around intentionally working with women community champions. This was also to kind of create a safe space where the women felt that they could contribute and speak without having men speak over them. So that was a platform, was kind of a safe space for them to be able to contribute. And then we also had intentionality around how we curated, for example, our text corpus. So we had also women run writing competitions, which were conducted across the 3 countries, and they specifically collected impact stories or change stories from the communities around women who were doing a lot of significant stuff in their communities. And this kind of also opened up not only creating text that is just normal text, but also text that kind of speaks to the resilience of women in these different communities. And this was very useful to them feeling comfortable to participate in the process. But we also have a set of participation guidelines that are stemming from Mozilla itself around how we build safe spaces for women to contribute to the process. And we also had to have this aired out whenever we're doing any activities. And we fostered the environment where people could come and speak around what is of benefit to them. So the example that Brighton mentioned around, sanitary pads and how having that as a benefit to the community kind of drew women to participate in the process. So that was also useful. But along the path, everything that we did was very intentional around how we got women to contribute, addressing their fears around trust, especially of how much data they give and how it's been used through the privacy statement, of course, because a Common Voice is informed consent driven. So that was very useful around addressing their fears. But we also had to go down to a point of explaining how this works and how people will not be able to identify specifically your voice when you're contributing on the platform. And this was helpful to us building that trust and encouraging them to participate in the process of contributing to the platform itself.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And there's another question from Slido. Are the efforts to expand the platform to allow uploading voice assets that are collected outside the platform due to lack of internet access? So I believe EM, you can take this. Maybe you can take this now, or maybe in your next step presentations. I don't know.
Yeah, I can speak to this one quickly. So yes, internet access continues to be a bit of a barrier. What we've decided to do as of this year is essentially open up our contribution API so that people can put their own front ends on top of it. So they still get to use the Common Voice infrastructure. They can use our storage, our hosting, our QA pipelines, all of that stuff, but they can also put their own front ends on top of it. And that means using mechanisms that are better for people to contribute in low bandwidth contexts or in intermittent internet access contexts, for example, through Telegram bots, WhatsApp bots, that kind of thing. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that in, I would say, around 6 weeks. We'll probably be launching that, and people will be able to make use of that because we appreciate that it is an ongoing challenge. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So then if we can, if there's no other question, maybe we can go on. Yeah, so I don't see a question. I believe we can go on. So the next thing we're going to look at is applications and success stories from our work. In short, what's the impact of the program or the program? One is we saw expanded technical innovation and creativity among African techies. We have had Nick speak about how they use their datasets. So Nick is from the Think team. They developed a code switching dataset for Kiswahili, first ever bilingual ASR chatbot to engage financial institutions, and the first ever AI voice-enabled speaker. Then we had Imarika, captured data at a very localized individual level and transferred this information to farmers via an application so they can adjust and adapt their farming practices. We have Haki Defem, developed the first dataset in the local Kiswahili dialect in the DRC. And then we had Live Health, used Mozilla Common Voice datasets and build a chatbot to convey livestock disease manuals to pastoralists living in the remote regions through affordable USSD applications. We had Wezesha Kibambe build a similar USSD chatbot for rural farmers. And then there was enabled access to functional voice technology within the different communities. Voice-enabled products usually exclude a whole number of people from accessing digital services. And there's a lot of data to show this. So we have currently 42% of adults in sub-Saharan Africa have access to these kinds of technologies. So we believe making this data available helps different technologists within the continent to build tools that our communities can access. So, for example, in the Marika project, they taught a 70-year-old Angelica, who referred to a mobile phone as a gadget, being the first time she held one, to be able to speak and be able to have access to information in her language. There was boosted access to educational information within the different communities because of the work that the awardees were able to do. In Marika, applications, as I said, personalized health weather information and soil characteristics that's shared among farmers. This helped them have access to this kind of information. Kiazibora, Think, and Haki were able to build chatbots that provided access to information to farmers in different areas, land rights information to different farmers across our communities. And then we have contributed to the tech ecosystem through the hackathons that we ran with different partners, through access to these data sets. We have people in who are awardees like Brian is now involved in the policy formulation and contribution to the national AI strategy. The Think team is doing amazing workshops with students in different universities. Duniacom is establishing an open voice communities in different colleges and universities across the Southern Highlands, Highland regions. Teams also conducted hackathons, botathons, boot camps to share their knowledge and expertise with other like-minded innovators. Several digital practitioners have benefited from the skills of tech from the Kiswahili program. Rebecca has mentioned the impact around our gender action plan. We have a number of women having access to phones that they're able to share in their women groups, the chamas, to be able to have access to information, again, around land rights and how they can secure and utilize their land legally. Women's show status has been raised as they become decision makers. A woman expanded her activities from a millet farmer to a farmer service provider dealing in grain, trade, and the supply of farm implements. So her economic status has grown because of access to this kind of information. So through our work with linguists, we have been able to enrich the data sets, the Kiswahili data sets, through the different introduction of dialects onto the platform. The awarded projects were selected to represent Kiswahili. So we had Kiswahili cha Pwani, Coastal Kenya Kiswahili, Kiswahili cha Bara ya Kenya, this Inland Kiswahili, Inland Kenyan Kiswahili, Kiswahili cha Bara ya Tanzania, Inland Tanzania Kiswahili, Kiswahili cha DRC. So we're able to have access to this data set categorized onto the platform. So networking and established partnerships through the different organizations we're able to work with. We're able to grow and reach different communities. This partnership helped raise awareness of the projects within the Common Voice project. The adoption of voice technology by governments, especially, go a long way in increasing the use of the NCP platform and expanding innovation and use of technology in Africa. We have one of our colleagues focused on this work. Partnerships help people grow and organizations grow, so provide a learning opportunity for both the projects teams and the participants. We had festivals and writing competitions supported through the program that generate a lot of interest that will nurture future writers. We have university students expertise assess the work while winning their prizes during the writing competition. So we get a lot of awareness around voice technology and the Common Voice platform. We did a whole lot of demonstrations around voice technology. As I mentioned before, when we were starting the work, we had to do a whole lot of learning around voice technology and AI. So this is very important. I believe we've done a whole lot in that area. The program media coverage, we had several of the projects covered in the media, promoting the work that we're doing, promoting the access to this kind of technology. The Common Voice Kiswahili program activities included publicity and media coverage, networking, and advocacy for the Mozilla Common Voice project. So I've mentioned a whole lot of these through the discussion. I think I can go to the next slide. So we have talked about the impacts of the work around dialects, domains, diversity and representation into the platform, self-selecting of gender or sex orientation, the domain inclusion of the culture and finance onto the assets. So I'll pass it on to EM.
Hi, thanks so much. Okay, great. So I think one of the big themes that has been pulled out by both kind of Brighton and Rebecca has been the governance piece. And thanks so much to everyone who asked questions about it as well. So on that side of things, as discussed, what we're going to be doing is offering people more choice around the license that they choose when they create data through the Common Voice infrastructure. We are still absolutely committed to data being as open as possible, but we also understand that this is the ecosystem is not a fair ecosystem. And so a world in which we release data sets into the open and some organizations have more resource to pick it up and run with it and train on it, etc., means that sometimes other organizations are losing out from the full benefit of the data that pertains to their language and their community. So what we'll be doing is offering communities more choice, and we'll basically be unveiling those plans in the next couple of weeks. So please do stay tuned on that front. And then in terms of the platform, so there were lots of different challenges that came up through this process, and it was great to have such kind of rich data back from the community on what could be improved. So we made lots of changes already. So one of the changes is that before Bright and Rebecca and the rest of the Kiswahili team joined us, there was no variant support on the platform really. So there was no way to say that this was one kind of Kiswahili and not another kind of Kiswahili. So all of the work that we've done now to make it possible to tag sentences with a particular variant or dialect, to tag yourself as a speaker with a particular variant or dialect, and to choose to only see sentences and clips from that variant. All of that work that we did was really due to the Kiswahili community work. So that was one big change that we made. We also, because we know that we get a lot of bulk uploads, so that's kind of big ingestions of lots and lots of sentences. In order for us to make sure that those sentences have permission, like we have the right permission to ingest them into the platform, that they're genuinely CC0, we do actually check every single submission individually. And that's for kind of obvious reasons, right? Like we want to make sure that, you know, we are saying the data set is CC0, so we have to make sure that the sentences that are going into it are CC0, so that all of the people, including many of you who are using the data set, can be kind of comfortable and assured that that data is safe to use and that it's clean in that way. So we check manually. We found that the process was creating delays for the community though, and so we've now changed the system so that we have small upload, medium upload, big upload, and we have different pipelines for each of those to make it much quicker if what you're talking about is, say, 1,000 sentences or 500 sentences rather than like 1,000,000 sentences. So again, that was a direct response to the feedback that we got through this process. We also ran a competition called Our Voices a couple of years ago to experiment with other more offline capable modes of data creation. And coming out of that, we made some improvements to an Android app that's built by one of our community members. And then we also prototyped with, again, a partner, what it would look like to have more contribution via bots. So for example, via a Telegram bot. Off the back of that, we've decided that the best thing for us to do is make it really easy for people to put their own front ends on top of Common Voice. So as I mentioned earlier, we'll be making a kind of public, secure contribution API available for the community so that if they want to put a different kind of front end on top of Common Voice, they can, and that can be optimized for their particular kind of internet usage context. So that's a couple of things on that. Next slide. Is there a next slide? Yeah. And part of this is really about making it much easier for people to get started on Common Voice. So at the moment, the platform is just one kind of big monolithic platform, and you have to use it as is, or you have to fork the whole thing, which most communities don't want to do because it means creating a whole separate infrastructure. So as we've said, what we're going to do is make it possible for you to use the underlying infrastructure, but put your own like web interface, bot interface, whatever on top of it. This also means that you can control the branding and you can control the messaging. If this is part of a concerted project by your team that sits within a particular field like agriculture or gender, and you're really looking for those contributions, and that's what you're trying to focus on, then now you can have that, you can signal that on your own kind of front end. So that's custom home pages, that's integrations with messaging platforms where all of your existing community members and users are. And we've really done this because we want to make it much easier for people to just reach their people where they are, which may or may not be the platform at the moment. And it gives the community a lot more ease of kind of customizing. We suspect that this is going to increase load on the platform. And so one of the other things that we'll be doing is kind of containerizing more of our features so it's easier for them to scale up quickly. And also because over time, we want people to be able to stack different components within the MCV services system. So let's say that you're thinking more about spontaneous speech, and so you really want to use that, but you're not so interested in using the scripted speech components, or you're mostly interested in using text, but not so much in using speech. We want to make it really easy for you to kind of mix and match on top of the platform. So that will be launched much later in the year. We'll essentially be offering people the ability to stack different parts of the Common Voice ecosystem, kind of Lego style. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, I see. Can everyone else hear me? I'm not quite sure why.
I can hear you.
Okay. All right, thanks so much. So RE, the licensing framework, so talked a little bit about this already. The CC0 license doesn't give a lot of choice. It really is it's zero attribution, and we have been hearing from lots of different communities that that's not right for them. So in 2025, multiple partners are being involved in piloting alternative licenses. We invested in the first African data license, which was created by a team including Dr. Chijoki Okieri, and we're going to be allowing people to choose between that license or other versions of Creative Commons that have more specific constraints, or a kind of mix and match of other existing licenses altogether. So there'll be 2 language communities who are working on that. In fact, we've got one of them has already started. And if other community members want to be part of that and they want to experiment with using these different licenses on Common Voice, then we're looking for more partners. We think we're going to learn quicker if we learn together. Next slide. And we also heard that, even aside from licenses, that we could be doing a better job around reward enablement and recognition. It's worth saying, so, 750,000 people have built the current data sets on Common Voice, and trying to figure out a system that scales well is not an insignificant challenge. But Common Voice is nothing without the communities who make use of the platform. So we're really thinking about how we make it possible to acknowledge people. We're a non-profit project. We don't sell the data sets. When people come and download them, it's always for free. We don't charge the users either. And we fundraise constantly to make sure that the project can stay open and free to everybody. So the question really becomes, how do we thank, how do we honor, respect, and build up our community? So this year we're rolling out the first version of a reward enablement and recognition scheme that's going to offer communities more benefits. So essentially, if you contribute to Common Voice, be that sentences or code, or if you act as a validator, any of the different roles that are possible within the ecosystem, if you do those things, then you basically can tap into benefits that might include recommendations on your expertise on LinkedIn, can include free training opportunities, kind of cash honoraria. We will offer you things like travel stipends, depending very much on the different roles. So we'll be rolling out a whole scheme of different things that you get for being part of this community. And that's going to be rolling out very shortly. And I don't know if Jess is here, but if Jess wanted to speak to that at all, now might be a good moment.
Hello, I am here, and this is the project. Obviously, I love my job, big picture, but this is the project I've been the most excited about. If it's not a bother, we've got a bunch of folks working on really, really valuable things in this space. If anybody has any strong opinions to say, hey, do you know what could unblock me? Or do you know what I would find really valuable? You're welcome to reach out to me directly. I'm Jessica Rowe. I'm Jessica. I'll drop my email into the chat. But yeah, this is a community-based project. The reward and recognition program is designed to try and design things that would work best for you all. So if you have any strong opinions or even not very strong opinions, I'd be so excited to hear about them. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Since I saw Stephen's message that I'm too quiet, my whole head is like right over the microphone, so I'm hoping people can hear me now. I'm just going to read out a couple of the questions we've been getting from Slido, all of which are great. So one is, what licenses will communities be able to choose from apart from CC0, which is a fantastic question. So we know of a few that have come out. So one is the one that, Common Voice and the Data Futures Lab put a little bit of funding behind. And then there is another one that has just come out from the amazing Lalapa team. There are some others around the Creative Commons ecosystem, and there's something called CopyFair. So there are a whole suite of options. Our plan right now is to basically give the communities, hey, these are the ones that we're aware of in the ecosystem. Have a look at these and see if they are right for your community, and have that conversation in community, because one of the reasons that we have resisted the complexity of having a lot of different licenses on the platform is just that we also find communities don't always have the same opinion about the data sets, and people have different capacity to engage in those conversations. So we've wanted to be thoughtful about that. So we will give communities the licenses that we're aware of, and also the space to come up with something different if they would like to come up with something different. And they will really be the ultimate deciders on that front. So we're kind of trying to make it possible for the communities to be completely in control. So we're not going to mandate a new license. We're just going to sketch out the ecosystem available to them and then help them and support them to choose. Are you accepting more partners for this? Yes, we are accepting more partners for this. We, at the moment, what we have found, so GIZ have very generously supported a first round of the pilot, and then UNDP are hoping to support another couple of language communities. So what we can offer is that people can come and do this on the platform, and we will cover all of our own costs. What we don't have at the moment is a separate dedicated pot of funding that we have that we can give people for taking part in the pilot. However, if you can find one elsewhere, then fantastic. And if you can cover your own costs to be part of it, then that's also great. As we are looking for people who could provide a sort of setup fund for communities who want to use a different license, because the CC0 creates a smaller burden for communities, because it means that they don't have to do a ton of administration around the data set. If there are people who are going to use licenses with more custom requirements, that does make work, right? Like if, for example, you want to control who's downloaded the data set, then you need to be there to actually track access requirements to the data set. So we are looking for backers who would be interested in making that work possible and making the funding available to communities who want to try. And if you have any great ideas, let us know. And then in terms of high consumer of tech or AI in our communities is more under 18 years. If we want to collect data sets that address children's needs like school training and programs, how is Mozilla addressing that trend? As far as their policy on age limit, it's such a good question. We come back to it regularly. So what we say at the moment is that that basically community members can use Common Voice if they are above the age of 19 or if they have parental consent. Now, that's obviously something that's difficult to track and authenticate. However, when we've had a close partner who wants to work on it, for example, we did some work with the Welsh community who were very focused on trying to create software that helped children to learn Welsh because of the kind of low intergenerational transfer of that language. If there are people who want to do concerted work with children, get in touch with us. We don't like to allow children's contributions on the platform unless we have a partner who we know is going to be really thoughtful about the work, have safeguarding policies, etc., etc. So we're open to it, and the wording on our policy and privacy policy does say that we're open to it, but we would prefer to do it in partnership just so that we can make sure that it's being done with all the care that you would hope for work with young people. Do you offer financial support for those who want to build new languages on Common Voice, especially low resource languages? Yes. So one of our kind of top requested funds is exactly that. Like, can we provide funding for the first kind of 10 hours of a new data set on Common Voice? Because actually getting launched, localized, and your first set of contributions in the door, we find that is a bottleneck for communities, just that first part, and then often they kind of take on a life of their own. So excited to say that we did last year pilot a closed round of something called the Open Multilingual Speech Fund, which was essentially funding for communities to create data sets on Common Voice, and we funded their data collection, setup costs, stipends and honoraria for all of their contributors, etc., up to the first 10 hours. So the only requirement was that it was a low resource language that we didn't already have creating data on the platform. And I'm excited to say that we're going to launch a public round of that as soon as my colleague Miguel comes back from annual leave. So probably next week, you'll see an announcement about that. So if anybody is looking for some funding to create data sets for a low resource language and they want to host it on Common Voice, and we don't already have it on Common Voice, then there is going to be a new pot of funding available called the Open Multilingual Speech Fund. So again, get in touch with us. We'll be happy to send you the call for proposals. Okay, how will you manage the different opinions of contributors around licensing on their specific language? So at the moment, we are hoping that, so we have an informal system in Common Voice where all language communities have a kind of language community manager. It tends to be the person or people who first requested the language, but we do, it does change and shift over time if, for example, that group has less capacity. So languages have sort of unofficial community leads, and we tend to have that kind of group be our point of contact. For now, what we're going to do is provide better tools and resources for communities to make the decision themselves. So that will involve things like, here are some guided questions for you to discuss as a community. Here are some best practices for handling conflict and disagreement within the community. So we'll be sharing those materials, and then we expect communities to figure it out and come back to us. We don't want to be the adjudicator, in large part because we really feel it isn't our choice to make. So what we're hoping to do is just make it easier for communities to have that conversation themselves before they come to us. So we would love kind of design partners for that, because the more feedback we can get about the materials we give people, the better they'll get. And obviously doing this for 200 different language communities from totally different parts of the world, totally different cultural contexts is really challenging. So we will give you the tools that we have, and then we would love it if the community could come back and say what worked for them and what didn't work for them as they're trying to discuss this. But it's such a great question. It's such a great question. Is Mozilla planning to support model development through the platform? Any partnership to support developers training models? So no, so we do not train models ourselves directly. we are interested in being supportive to that community. There are two things that we're doing at the moment. So one is we're going to run a hackathon around Mozilla Festival, and people who take part in the hackathon will have access to various benefits for doing it. And then there is a separate body of work that isn't announced yet, and the details are still very much being finalized, but we are working with a consortium of other groups who are trying to think about democratizing access to compute. And as soon as we have more information about what that's going to look like, our community will be the first to know. Okay, that's the questions I have in Slido. I'm just going to switch over to Zoom. Are there any future projects that will focus to boost entrepreneurship and innovation? Yeah, I love that question. Not directly within Common Voice at the moment, but I will definitely ask around Mozilla. There is a grant-making wing of Mozilla that focuses on things like open technologies, called the Mozilla Technology Fund, that is currently going through a kind of redesign process. And I know that these themes of entrepreneurship and innovation have been really key. So I will make a note to make sure that as soon as that team is ready to talk about its next batch of projects, that I kind of share it back with this group. Okay, were there any questions that I missed? Any slides that I missed, Brighton?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Shout outs.
You do the shout out. You do the shout outs.
Okay. Thank you very much. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our amazing partners and friends at Fair Forward, Belinda and Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, GIZ. I know some of them are here. I believe Daniel is here. Daniel wants to say one word in Kiswahili.
Ooh, I wish I could say something in Kiswahili. All I got taught was Nyaje, and I hear that's not Kiswahili. That anyway, that's Sheng. But no, thanks so much, Brighton. I mean, yeah, really happy that our support could be like a small cog in all of this amazing work that you, Rebecca, all the communities, and everyone else has been doing. This is and this event, just sharing everything, is just reinforcing that. It's really, really cool. I'm really grateful. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Like I see EM is echoing the question. I think I missed one of my colleagues, Mark. Mark, are you still here?
Yes, I am. Yeah. Also, of course, thanks for the presentation, Brighton, and to thank everyone who's supported the work as well, because I think it's kind of making inroads to being able to support like the downstream work, which we would like to continue to proceed, that is enabled by this work. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I can see Nick has a question. I don't know if EM, you can take that question. He's asking what directed the decision to compress the audio data. We have done a short study on the effects of compression on downstream tasks and found that the effect was minimal. Awesome. Thank you for the response. Thank you very much. So I don't know if we have any other question left. Any other question to ask? I'm going to share the link to the Common Voice community Discord in the chat, so you can join the community, get updates, and see how you can work with the team. I've shared it in the chat. Rebecca, do you have anything, or we can all break?
So just thank you to everyone for showing up and for your questions and comments. Very useful.
Awesome. Asanteni sana kwa wale walichukua muda wao na kujiunga nasi. Robert is asking for special invites to Mosfest, or he's asking for a friend. I don't know if I don't have access to. Okay, Emma said email her. Also, I can see that I'm happy to see that Robert is not tired of Mosfest after joining us in the previous one. Asanteni sana kwa kujiunga nasi. Thank you for joining us in this session. And I would like to thank everyone who was able to contribute to the work that we've shared, the community champions that are here. I can see we have Joanne, I can see we have Lydia, I can see we have Lydia, I can see Marcy just left. Marcy was here. Thank you to the Common Voice team for the continued support. Thank you for helping us throughout the whole work. And thank you for the leadership, EM, seeing those changes added to the platform, seeing the community being listened to. Thank you very much. I can see one of our leaders is just joining us while we are ending. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank you again. And I hope you have a lovely evening, a great evening, or great morning, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you very much. And I would like to say, I'm out. Bye.
Bye.